Welcome back to Stack Shack Sports Show. Today we're talking about the Bengals. Another team, another day, right? As we lead into the NFL season, we will be previewing every single team on this channel, their key offseason losses, their key offseason additions, a little review of what happened to end of the season the year before, and some projections and key games to watch moving into the next season. Today we have, well, my favorite team, the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They are my team. And, it was a little bit of a disappointing season last year. 9-8 record, didn't make the playoffs. 26th ranked offense, 15th ranked defense. But the key thing to remember is Joe Burrow, the quarterback of the future, supposed to be in Cincinnati. He wasn't available for most of the season. When Joe Burrow plays, they look pretty good. When he doesn't play, they don't look that great. And him being injured once again, this isn't the first time it's happened. He's now been dealing with these injuries somewhat consistently year over year. The one year that he was mostly healthy, they made it to the Super Bowl. Still think he's a great player, but those injury issues are starting to creep up. So they come in after really a disappointing season, 9-8, not making the playoffs. Now, to be fair, they had a winning record, right? I mean, that's something a lot of teams that we've already even looked at can't say. And, 9-8 teams made the playoffs. It's just they're in the AFC North. And you're not going to get to the playoffs 9-8, right? They live in probably the most difficult and competitive division in football. I mean, think about it. We looked at the Baltimore Ravens earlier. We're looking at the Bengals today. Browns and Steelers are not bad teams. And so keep an eye out on this division. It's always tight. It's always close. Looking at some key losses and key additions. Key losses, I think the biggest loss is really Joe Mixon. Now, he doesn't get the accolades of a lot of other running backs in the league, but if you look at his production, it's been off the charts. And he's been kind of that staple, solid force. Really, carried the Bengals to this 9-8 record, in my opinion. Was one of the most key players on this offense when Joe Burrow's not playing. They really leaned on him to get them over the hump and get them a winning record at the end of the season. His loss, I think, is significant. Now, it's a situation, we've talked about it before on the channel, running backs, you just don't pay them like maybe you used to. And a lot of people think, I'm just going to draft some. I'm just going to bring in some other free agents. I'm not going to give them that second, third, fourth big contract. And, Joe Mixon, rightly so, in my opinion, was ready to get another big contract. He had a great season. He's pretty much always available. And the Bengals decided, no, we're going to let Mixon go, and we're going to bring in Zach Moss. Now, Zach Moss has been a somewhat productive running back out of the Bills. So they kind of have this let Mixon go, bring in another kind of veteran guy, and we'll see how that works out. Obviously, the next biggest thing people are wondering about is, can they protect Joe Burrow? I mean, you look at his statistics. For the games that he has played, right, he's been hurt, and so therefore, how many sacks he's taken in the last couple years goes down because he's just not even in the game because he was already sacked so many times he's hurt. He gets sacked and hit a lot. And it's not always just Joe's fault. Now, some of the blame, when you see a high sack number or high hit number, some of the blame can always be leveled at the quarterback to say, hey, you got to get rid of the ball, right? Tom Brady is famous for this. He hardly ever got hit. Why? Because the ball was out of his hands so fast. You couldn't run. Even if nobody was blocking you, he was almost always getting the ball out. In shotgun, it's going to take a second or two maybe. He was getting the ball out quickly to his receivers, making really good decisions. Joe Burrow has a tendency to maybe hang on to the ball a little bit longer than a Tom Brady, obviously. But it's not bad. He has one of the quickest releases in the game, and the offense that Zach Taylor was running around him a lot of the times was made to help protect him, made to give him quick reads, quick, easy throws, get the ball out of his hands. Offensive line still has had some struggles. Now, hopefully that has been alleviated. Bengals, once again, second offseason in a row, went heavy on the offensive line, which is what they need to do. They need to protect Joe Burrow. He's got to stop getting hurt. Now, maybe this is a situation where Joe Burrow is, his body's falling apart a little bit. He's played football for a while. Maybe this is just an unfortunate case of, his ligaments, his bones, his muscles are not hanging on as well as they used to, right? And that he's just very injury prone. Maybe he is one of those guys. But in the meantime, I think it's the right strategy for Cincinnati to go heavy on offensive line. Because whether Joe Burrow is in there or not, you're going to want to have a good offensive line. If you have a great offensive line, rookie quarterbacks are happier, backup quarterbacks are happier, right? You could be more productive. So they go out and they get Trent Brown, really solid tackle. And then they spent their first pick on Mims. Now, Mims is an interesting case. There is some controversy over this draft pick because he really hasn't played much. I think he only played a few games at Georgia because of some injuries and various issues, right? So he's a little bit of a work in progress, right? Maybe not quite as technically refined as some of the other tackles in the draft, but he is an absolute specimen. And if you go watch the tape of him at Georgia in the few games he played, he was a dominant offensive tackle. So I think with those two, you're shoring up some of the tackle positions. Now, you do lose Jonah Williams, an offensive tackle who was actually fairly productive, but I do think Trent Brown and Mims, that's an upgrade, in my opinion, over Jonah Williams. Even though Jonah was fine, he was serviceable, I do think Trent Brown is a better tackle than him, just flat out. And then you also bring Mims in. So I think tackle should be okay. And then they lose the defensive tackle, DJ Reader. Now, this was a defense that really struggled last season, and DJ Reader was often one of the best parts, like kind of the foundation of that. So I do think there are some serious concerns on the defensive side of the ball for Cincinnati. I mean, they were 26th ranked by PFF last season, while their offense was 15th. 26th ranked defense is not going to get it done if you're Cincinnati. And really, Cincinnati, they have an expectation now. If Joe Burrow is healthy, they want to be playing for AFC championship games, right? That's been the historical precedent. Joe Burrow healthy, they're in the AFC championship game or they're in the Super Bowl, right? That's kind of how this has gone the last few years. And so to have the defense be playing as poorly as it was, and then to lose, that center defensive lineman and DJ Reader really played very well in a lot of moments. That is tough. That is a difficult loss for the Bengals. They lost some other pieces, and some other pieces aren't happy, right, on that defense. So that is going to be, I think, the key for Cincinnati moving forward. Can that defense hold up, and how well will that defense hold up? Now, some important games to look for. Week 2 at the Chiefs. That's a rivalry game, essentially, at this point, right? Chiefs, Bengals, they've had some great clashes over the last few seasons. Obviously, last year, Burrow not being hurt, but a couple of straight back-to-back AFC championship games were decided by these two teams. There is definitely a rivalry brewing there. So week 2 at the Chiefs. Holy smokes. I can't wait to talk about the Chiefs opening schedule. It's like every important game is just every game for the Chiefs. They have a brutal schedule, but I don't know if you noticed, if you watched the Baltimore Ravens game, and then now you're watching the Bengals, they're getting them at home. A huge advantage, especially for the Chiefs at Arrowhead, right? So week 2 at the Chiefs, that's going to be a huge game. We're going to have that one circled. Hopefully both teams will be fully healthy at that time, barring any week 1 shenanigans or preseason shenanigans. They should be okay. And then for the Bengals, I think it's the Ravens games, the 2 Ravens games, week 5 versus the Ravens, and then week 10 at the Ravens. I think those are going to be very, very important games for the Bengals. Divisional games, and typically, if you look at historical precedent, those are the top 2 teams, should Burrow be healthy, in the AFC North. On paper, typically those have been. Now, I think the Steelers, that's going to be interesting with what happens with Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. How's that quarterback situation going to work? We're going to be talking about that tomorrow. Could make a move. The Browns, interesting team to be on the lookout for, right? The Bengals can't seem to beat the Browns the last few years, so maybe I should have put those on their most important games. But most likely, it's going to be Ravens and Bengals at the top of the division, and it's a very tough division, so those games are going to be incredibly important. Then the other game I threw on here is Week 11 at the Chargers, right? I think there is a little bit of a rivalry. Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, similar ages, right? Both looked at as young stars in the league coming up. And so I thought that was an interesting game. The fact that the Bengals have to go out to Los Angeles to play the Chargers, right? That's a kind of a crossed coast trip there for them. And how will that fare? Week 11. I think that's going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be a game, people are going to circle as I want to watch this game. Could have huge implications, later on in the season. How well do the Chargers do under Jim Harbaugh? Justin Herbert finally feeling like he has a competent coach behind him. That might raise the stakes there at week 11. So, Bengals fans, let me know what you're thinking. I know for me as a fan, I am worried about that defense. I'm not as worried, ironically, about the offensive line as I have been in previous years. As long as Joe Burrow can stay healthy, as long as that offensive line can keep him upright, I think the offense should be pretty solid, right? I know there's contract disputes kind of with, T. Higgins and all that, but looks like he's going to play this season, right, under that franchise tag. So this might be kind of that last hurrah for that solid wide receiver room. Obviously, they're going to continue drafting and developing, and hopefully they can find some good other solid production. But defense, worried about the defense. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and we'll see you tomorrow.